March 2024, a simple traffic stop in rural Texas led wardens to a cargo no one expected: 7 deer packed in the dark. Within months, investigators uncovered a smuggling ring across 11 counties, 24 suspects, and over 1,400 criminal charges, threatening the state's $9.6 billion deer industry and public health. But how did this ghost deer network operate in plain sight for so long? The answer begins with a single moment, and it unravels a scandal far larger than anyone imagined. Texas game wardens didn't stop at the county line. Within days of the initial discovery, patrol logs show a rapid expansion, first into neighboring counties and then across a vast stretch of the state. 11 counties became the focus. They were Bandera, B, Brazoria, Duval, Edwards, Jim Wells, Live Oak, Montgomery, Tom Green, Travis, and Webb. Each location revealed new layers: unregistered breeding pens tucked behind locked gates, shipping routes winding through rural backroads, and records that did not add up. The scope of the investigation demanded coordination on a scale rarely seen in wildlife enforcement. Regional game warden teams coordinated with county sheriffs, agricultural inspectors, and federal wildlife agents. Interagency memoranda of understanding activated joint task forces, pooling resources for surveillance, undercover assignments, and coordinated raids. Patrol logs document wardens clocking hundreds of hours on stakeouts, sometimes moving from one county to the next in a single night. Maps of the operation trace a web of connections. Deer were moved from Montgomery to Brazoria, then on to Duval and beyond. Each transfer an attempt to erase the animal's origin. Investigators found a pattern of repeat transfers and falsified movement records designed to hide where animals came from and where they went. The sheer number of counties involved made it clear this was not a local poaching ring, but a statewide network operating in the shadows. The coordinated response set a new standard for wildlife crime investigations in Texas. Every agency worked toward a single goal: to track the movement of every unaccounted deer and to dismantle the machinery behind the ghost deer trade. Indictment packets landed on prosecutors' desks across Texas in August 2025. The state's case named Ken Schlaudt, age 64, as the operation's mastermind, owner of 4 breeding facilities and a release site, and until recently, a board member of the Texas Deer Association. Bill Bowers, 55, managed day-to-day operations at the Tom Green County facility. Both men surrendered to authorities after learning they faced felony charges for tampering with government records, specifically for entering false data into the Texas Wildlife Information Management System to mask illegal deer movements. The charges did not stop with the masterminds. In all, 24 suspects were swept up in the investigation, spanning breeders, transporters, and ranch hands from 11 counties. The indictment outlined a criminal enterprise built on smuggling breeder and wild deer, swapping identification tags, and running unregistered facilities hidden from state inspection. Each defendant faced a share of the roughly 1,400 criminal charges filed, ranging from wildlife misdemeanors to felony record tampering and drug offenses tied to mishandling controlled sedation drugs. The weight of the evidence was staggering. Seized tissue samples, falsified paperwork, and movement records showed animals crossing county lines on dates that defied possibility. For Schlaudt and Bowers, the legal exposure went far beyond a single mistake. Prosecutors accused them of orchestrating a system that exploited regulatory loopholes and put Texas's $9.6 billion deer industry at risk. The indictments transformed the investigation from a sprawling manhunt into a courtroom reckoning, naming names and assigning blame for the machinery behind the ghost deer trade. Hidden behind barbed wire gates and dense stands of mesquite, the operation's secret breeding pens were built to avoid every eye except those on the inside. These sites were not listed on any permit, nor did they appear in state databases. Transport crews worked in the dark, backing livestock trailers down rutted ranch roads long after midnight. The deer, some born in captivity and others snatched from the wild, were loaded and unloaded under cover of night, their ear tags swapped like poker chips to erase any sign of where they had come from. A single animal might wear 3 different numbers during its journey, each tag corresponding to a different set of falsified records. Movement logs seized during raids revealed routes that zigzagged across county lines, often doubling back to throw off any inspection. The smugglers relied on handwritten ledgers and burner phones, never trusting a digital trail. At every stage, the paperwork followed the tags, not the deer, allowing animals to slip through regulatory cracks without detection. Inspection photos captured makeshift holding pens, corrals built from scrap metal and plywood, hidden deep on private land. In one case, a pen held more than a dozen deer, none with legal documentation, all waiting for their next transfer. These ghost facilities operated outside the reach of scheduled state checks, shielded by locked gates and false addresses. The entire system was engineered so that a physical audit, no matter how thorough, could never match the living inventory to what was on the books. By the time wardens arrived, the evidence had already moved on. In November 2025, lab reports confirmed what wildlife officials had feared. 2 deer from Ken Schlaudt's Tom Green County facility tested positive for chronic wasting disease, CWD. The news landed like a warning shot across the state. These were the first chronic wasting disease cases ever detected in Tom Green County, and they came after months of investigation into falsified records and testing violations. State and federal labs verified the results, but by then, the damage was already spreading. Investigators found that tissue samples submitted for official chronic wasting disease testing often came from wild deer poached outside the breeding program, not from the captive animals listed on paperwork. Freezers held samples with mismatched tags, and movement logs failed to account for dozens of animals. With negligent record keeping and deliberate tampering, no one could say how many deer exposed to chronic wasting disease had already been shipped to other ranches or released into the wild. The scale of the risk became clear as new data surfaced. Texas recorded 387 cases of chronic wasting disease in 2024, more than double the previous year total. 31 counties and 34 breeding facilities were now affected. Prion researchers and public health officials warned that chronic wasting disease, sometimes called zombie deer disease, is always fatal and can spread silently for years before symptoms appear. There is no cure and no test for live animals. The only way to track the disease is through rigorous post-mortem sampling, a process undermined by falsified records and swapped tissue. The consequences ripple far beyond a single ranch. One infected deer moved undetected can seed outbreaks across the state, threatening wild herds, hunting traditions, and public health in ways that cannot be reversed. Texas deer hunting is more than a pastime. It is a $9.6 billion industry that fuels rural economy and shapes livelihoods for thousands. Each year, over 753,000 hunters take to the field, and nearly 1,000 breeders work to supply the high-stakes market for trophy bucks. In this world, a single deer with the right genetics can fetch anywhere from $10,000 to $100,000, and land prices for prime ranches have soared to as much as $10,000 an acre. But the boom comes with a cost. Since emergency disease rules took hold, more than 10% of breeders have already left the business, and another 10% say they are planning their exit. For those who remain, every new regulation or outbreak threatens not just their profits, but the future of their way of life. The pressure to deliver trophy animals and the rewards for cutting corners have never been higher. Court dockets across Texas are filled with the names of those charged in the ghost deer case. Prosecutors filed felony counts of tampering with governmental records against Ken Schlaudt and Bill Bowers, each charge carrying up to 10 years in prison and a $10,000 fine under Texas law. On top of that, more than 100 wildlife misdemeanors stacked up for both men, with additional drug charges tied to the illegal possession and mishandling of powerful sedation drugs used to capture deer. The full indictment stretched to nearly 1,400 criminal counts against 24 defendants, making it one of the largest wildlife prosecutions in state history. Facing the threat of stacked sentences, the lead defendants could spend decades behind bars if convicted on every count. Meanwhile, state regulators froze all movement of deer from implicated facilities. Emergency orders quarantined herds, halted transfers, and triggered a wave of intensified CWD testing, locking down the entire industry while the courts weighed the evidence. Today, high-fence ranches still operate, and cases of chronic wasting disease, CWD, in Texas have more than doubled in 1 year. As regulators race to contain the fallout, every hunter and consumer faces the reality: when profit trumps oversight, disease does not respect boundaries. The future of Texas wildlife hangs in the balance.